Hello. Hi, everybody. How you doing? Are we just going to go? Are we going to start now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. 9 o'clock. We're going. Okay. Cool. Well, I think all the technology is working, and we're live on LinkedIn for the very first time here at EDO. We're very excited about it. It's been an operation to get this up and running, and I think it's going to be very great. I'm very excited to tell a bit about leveraging design to scale your startup. Now, we have roughly an hour's time to talk a bit about this topic, which I'm very passionate about. And I think people are slowly getting on the live. So I'm just going to spend a few seconds treading to get more people online so they know the brief of this webinar. We have, so I can tell you a bit about what I mean when I say leveraging design. So our focus is, something's happening. It's all good?
Okay, just 2 seconds. We have a small echo, so I'm just going to mute the mic.
Oh, I wasn't muted. Okay. I'm just talking. Great.
Okay, we're back.
Okay, we're back. We're going to get some. Stephanie's going to verify that she can hear us. Hello, everybody. Minor technical issues here from the morning. It's inevitable. It's all good? Great. We got the okay from Stephanie and Philippa. Hey, everybody. Now we're starting for real. Welcome to EDO's very first webinar with a very minor technical hiccup. That's the only technical issue we're going to have today. I can feel that. We're going to talk a bit about leveraging design to scale your startup. And when we talk leveraging design, it's, for me at least, it's all about using design, figuring out how to use design as a tool, as a facilitator to drive some sort of progress. And for startups, that could very well be making it a more healthy business. For development teams, it could be to support the development teams to work more efficiently and be more productive in what they do. So there's many different ways to look at it. We're going to look at it today, though, however, through the lens of a startup. So we're going to be a bit practical, and the goal of the webinar today is to be very tangible. We really want to have you, when you leave this webinar, we want to give you some recommendations. We want to make sure you have some recommendation to do some short, and you have some options to do some short and long-term improvements in your startup. I'm looking over at Philippa because I think we might have another technical issue. I'll just continue in case we don't. We'll be addressing some common startup challenges. That everything's good?
We're not following your screen.
Oh no.
But I am following you.
Okay, let me just reshare. We're just one slide deep. It's all good?
No, but I am following you. So
Can you
it's all
follow?
good. No.
It's all good?
Okay.
Okay, final technical issue for today. Webinar goal. As I said, it's we're going to look into some of the most impactful areas where you as a startup can use design to facilitate some sort of progress. And it's all about using design to drive your business forward in general. We're going to address some of these common startup challenges, and we're going to try to be a bit visual, as I said, tangible too, with using some sort of matrix. We will, throughout the webinar, plot in different bubbles with different focus areas where we, in our experience, believe that you will get a high impact, and it might be easy or difficult to do, but to kind of equip you with the knowledge, at least based on our experience. We have some case stories with us today too, to kind of back it up or give you some more, again, visuals to better understand these topics. So without further ado, I think we're over the worst technical issues. We'll talk about these 5 topics, or at least 4 topics, and then a Q&A at the end with you guys if you have any questions throughout this webinar. For the next 45 minutes, we'll be discussing these challenges. Now, these 4 challenges are kind of in priority in a way that the first one we're going to dig into is a bit superficial, as in it's a bit more subjective because it's a bit more brand related, it's a bit more website related, like this first impression that we give people, especially in a crowded market where we might have a lot of competition nationally and internationally. We will then dig into some of the product side of things with low product adoption, which is more about onboarding and making sure people get into the product, they engage with the product, they want to pay for using the product, how we can convert them in this onboarding process. We have a very nice case study with us today about that. Limited development resources and technical debt becomes a bit more technical, it becomes a bit more cultural and strategic in your organization, it becomes a bit more complex to talk about. But design is a wonderful facilitator in this area. Surprisingly to many, is a great way to not necessarily avoid technical debt, but minimize the impact on your organization. And we'll talk a lot about that. It's one of my favorite subjects. Q&A at the end, right on LinkedIn, and we'll receive some comments somewhere, and then we'll be able to pull them up on the screen at the end. If there is, I assume there's also some designers available, or not available, but on the call today on the webinar. So if there's anything you want to challenge or discuss, I'm also very interested in doing that. But if you have any questions, write them as they pop into your mind, and we'll have a look at them at the end. First problem, unnoticed in a crowded market. And this, again, just to set the stage, you're a startup, it's a saturated market nationally or internationally, and you might have a feature set that looks very much like many others. So how can you differentiate yourself in this market? And if we just look at the beautiful matrix we have here, I've tried to position some of these focus areas based on our experience. So some of the things we're going to talk about today is the highlighted ones here, which is Series A branding. What I mean by that is the step above making it yourself. So presumably having somebody professional in the field do the branding for you to make you look professional and consistent. And that also leads into the brand consistency, which we will talk a bit about today, but not too much. Website design, obviously, being one of the bigger first impression areas where we can make a huge impact, coupled with a clear call to action. It's very simple, call to actions, but we often forget, and we might sometimes also make it a bit too complex. Have one call to action. We'll dig into that in a bit. Quality visuals for pitch decks and tone of voice and storytelling, also important. I've tried to be a bit, and you'll see that throughout the different sections, I've tried to be a bit pessimistic. I've tried to be a bit aggressive in terms of placing these, so everything doesn't belong in the top left corner. But quality visuals for pitch deck, I've placed this down here. I just want to add a note to it because not everybody is looking for funding necessarily. So for some people, this might be a very important high impact area, but for others, this might be less important. But if everything around you looks good, I'm sure you'll get the right recognition from the investors you're looking for anyway. All right, it wouldn't be a webinar if we didn't have any stats with us today. We have a few stats. They might seem a bit crazy initially. There are some sources at the bottom. Feel free to go check them out and kind of get the context around the numbers too. I won't delve too much into it, but it's basically just to paint a clear picture that you need to be mindful of the fact that design does have an impact besides just looking good or feeling nice. In some of these instances, for example, with the first one and the second one, it's a lot about credibility that's going to have an effect on the money you're making. If people don't find you credible by looking at your website, I can guarantee you that the chance of them signing up or even engaging with an onboarding process is very slim. So you want to look professional. Depending on the industry you're in and the audience you're looking for, that differs in terms of how much you need to spend in certain areas or how focused you need to be. Consumer-based applications, for example, there's a higher expectations for greatness because there's so much. Whereas in an enterprise segment, the bar might be a bit lower. I won't dig into that, but there are some. You need to apply this to your own industry too. The last one, the biggest one, crazy number, but there is something to be said about the fact that people have some sort of feeling around like what looks good and what feels polished, and that will kind of rub off on anything you're doing, anything associated with you. So if you don't look great on LinkedIn, on your website, wherever, it might have a negative impact on how they perceive your product. We have a case with us today, a very recent example, and Autobudget is a great partner of ours, and we work with them for quite some time now, focused a lot on the product side, mostly actually. We've been very privileged to be able to work on the website too, to kind of be in charge of the whole experience, the whole customer journey from landing on the website to going through the onboarding to actually using the platform. So this is a very exciting case for us. This is their previous website. They had this 2-3 weeks ago, and we recently launched the new website. I wanted to pinpoint a few areas for improvement that we see often in most projects. It doesn't just apply to auto budgets, but it's a very general thing because websites are generally speaking not the place where we see the biggest priority initially. Everything is very product focused because that's the important thing. That's what we're trying to sell. We're trying to make some money. The website becomes very secondary, so we just need something. But it's going to hurt you in the long run if you don't do anything about it, especially if you're depending on your objective. But if you're looking for customers or investors, this needs to look great. A few points to be said, and then I'll show you what we ended up with briefly. We had some talks about Series A branding, like this elevated branding that looks great and feels consistent and feels like something that is worth something. Is very difficult to put words on it, but when you see something, you have a feeling about it. Is this high quality? Is this worth my time? Focus on getting your logo, your colors, your typography, everything associated with your brand. Make sure you get that in order. It doesn't have to take a long time. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It's a lot of great people accessible, freelancers. There's a lot of options for you. Get this settled because it's something you won't change a whole lot anyway. So make sure the foundation is great to begin with. It's going to help you a lot. Clear communication. I can't remember where I read it, and it might also be false, but the internet in general, like on average, every website is 80% words, like it's text, and that's why communication plays such a big role. Besides the visuals, besides how things feel and look, and how things appear when you scroll, words are the most essential thing to communicate whatever you're communicating. A great example here with auto budgets, and a lot of companies do this, they focus on the what. They initially, when I read this, auto budget is a subscription-based service, before I even get to why they exist, I know it's just a SaaS product, which is not very interesting to me. So focus on the pain points, focus on getting the thing you're solving in the forefront, especially in this first impression. This is the very first time I see auto budgets. I want to know why I need to spend my time or money with them. Consistency in tone of voice, of course, and a crystal clear call to action is also very important. There's not really any here. I don't know what they want me to do. The tone of voice for auto budgets, who is in a very traditional industry, be mindful of how you want to communicate. There is room to be expressive or witty or humorous, even in a very traditional old business or industry. Just be mindful of how you do it and then be consistent with it. There is room to be different, especially in a crowded market. Another point that is worth mentioning here, and it kind of goes into the what of things. I don't know exactly what they're offering. They have a video in the bottom right corner, which is a good video and it should be in the forefront, but I don't know this is a SaaS product by looking at the website. It could be anything. So bring the product in the forefront. And if you're selling hardware, bring the hardware up. I want to know what I'm buying or what you're offering me. Visual appeal is a bit subjective, but there are some fundamentals that you as an individual, as a user, will look at without maybe knowing. And there is some to be said in terms of spacing and font sizes and the space between the lines, and especially inconsistencies. I think inconsistencies is the biggest takeaway in terms of aesthetics and everything looking nice and feeling sharp and polished. And there might be some improvements to be had here. If we take a look at the final result here, the thing we launched a few weeks ago, the new autobudgets.com, there are a few things I want to point out. Now, one thing is, it's worth noting, and I said that we've been working on the product for quite some time, designing the visuals, the user experience, making sure that's very great, closely with their team. We kind of got inspired by the visuals from there because we want that consistent experience. We don't want the product to feel something completely different than the website. We did some refresh on the logo, very briefly, very simply, just elevated it and used some nice colors to make them seem a bit more modern. The website in general is also very dynamic, which leads into this it feels very modern. And the communication, I think, is very crystal clear here in terms of speaking to the pain point. In their case, we work close together with the CEO to figure this out. But the main issue they have, their customers, is everything takes such a long time. If you're sitting with liquidity budgets, 200 liquidity budgets every month, you want it to be extremely simple. Great. Next problem. I hope that made a lot of sense. Next problem. Low product adoption. Now we're moving into the more product side of things. We've received a good impression as a user. We've seen a good impression of Autobudgets or any particular startup, and now we want to progress into the funnel of becoming a potential customer in the end. And if we return to the matrix focused on the adoption, very in the center we have onboarding, which is usually the biggest kind of area that is very not prioritized. It often gets forgotten, or we look at it later. And if you want to scale, especially as any company really, you want this to be as automated as possible. You want to be able to go to sleep and wake up and new people have joined the platform on a free trial. Maybe they're already paying. I know this is, and I can talk a lot about this too, but I won't, because that's not the point of this webinar. But some industries, maybe enterprise level industries where there's a lot of manual labor to get a new client on board, there are ways to make sure that you can also get like the benefits of a more simple startup solution where people can onboard themselves, self-service sign-on. There are ways to make sure you can get people in the funnel without them having to get a demo or call you. But for this purpose, onboarding should be quite simple for most startups, at least technically speaking. Now, aha moments is also a big thing that we try to practice here at EDO, and I think most UX designers are. If not, they should. The aha moments, and I'll get back to that, is a very pivotal moment in the user journey, on the customer journey in general. We have some things around it that is also ultra important: conversion opportunities, meaning that we want to get them inside the platform. That's great. They might start on a free trial, but how do we get them to the basic level? How do we get them to pay $10 a month? How do we move them to $50 a month? How do we move them through these different checkpoints that we have to make them a more valuable customer? Very interesting. We won't talk too much about that today, unfortunately, but it's a very interesting topic. Gamification too just helps people be engaged. Emailing strategy being, if they haven't been on the platform for 2 weeks, how do we get them back into the platform to get some value from you guys, to remember that you exist? And customer support I've placed down here. It might be a bit odd to have on this too, but I wanted to have it because it's one of the biggest bottlenecks we see when we start to scale. We have a platform that works great. People want it. We have an onboarding process that works. People can sign up themselves. inevitably at some point there's going to be issues, and in that case you need customer support. You need customer support no matter what, some sort of a help line. If the UX, if the platform doesn't support your journey, the customer journey, you will see customer support becoming this bottleneck because there's got too much stress, too many tickets, too many phone calls, and you need to have more people in that customer support team, and it's going to be an expense, and you might not have the budget for that, and it's not a priority. Whatever it might be, there are ways for design to kind of minimize the headcount, minimize the stress on customer support, so they also have a nice day at work. We'll get back to that at some point. I think I'll mention it, but it's not the most important thing for today. A funnel. We like funnels. This funnel is a very classic example of an onboarding. It is very fictional, but it still serves a purpose of communicating this to you guys. Initially, we have some sort of entry point. In this case, it's a LinkedIn ad. It could be anything. It could be a YouTube video. It could be a Facebook post. It could be a personal post. No matter what, somebody is working hard to get people into this funnel, which is the onboarding funnel. At the end, you have returning daily, like the user returns daily. It might be free, trial. It might also be a paid subscription, which is ideally what we consider in this instance. But you have all this space up at the top. You might have noticed that already, which is essentially just waste. It's very wasteful, and it can oftentimes be contributed to poor UX, like a customer journey or a user journey that has not been considered thoroughly enough to make sure that after creating their account, they get in the account creation flow, they create their account. Why do they disappear here? Why do they not keep using the product? There is obviously a lot of reasons for that to happen. They've been misled on the website, or it doesn't live up to the experience that they imagined they would receive, or it simply doesn't support the pain points they have. Many reasons. We need to figure out why that is. The money side of things is worth mentioning, and I think it's very clear for most people, but it goes without saying that marketing and sales it's not like a free expense. There's salaries, there is budgets for marketing, there might be some paid socials. All of this is taken from some sort of budget that could be placed elsewhere, or at least combined with something else to make sure that this works optimally. We see this often when marketing and sales work in isolation, and they work very hard to get people into this funnel, and then UX is kind of left on the side to just do as they need, do as they try their best, but there might be some issues here that we can improve. And the aha moment, I mentioned that briefly before, just want to put some clarifying words on it. The aha moment is if you don't know while listening to this webinar right now, if you don't know what your aha moment is, you need to figure that out after this webinar. You need to sit down and consider your customer journey, the platform you have right now, or the thing you're trying to build. At what point do we get this aha moment, which is this clarifying moment for a new user that uses your product, where they realize, oh my God, this thing is solving the issue I have. This is the right thing for me. I want to pay for it. I want to keep using it. I want to have all my friends using it. I want to have my whole company use it. This aha moment is super crucial, and there might be more aha moments during this journey, but we want to make sure we push that as far in the front as possible. We want them to realize and experience that aha moment as soon as possible. I hope that makes sense. I'll show you how we've kind of looked at this in one of our recent user journeys we've designed for our good friends at PropMiner. It's onboarding flow, where we try to have a look at some of the, not necessarily pain points, but some of the places where we can clearly show what PropMiner is for and why it's so great, and make sure that they're engaged from the beginning. Excuse me. In this example, we land on a landing page, and it's for ESG reporting. So there is I think for most people who knows anything about ESG, it's very important, and it's very up in the times, and it's something that just needs to be done. So we want to make sure that this process is as simple as possible. Once they decide to start using this tool, or at least engage with it in terms of onboarding, we have a very simple onboarding flow that is segmented. You've seen this all over the internet. It's not rocket science per se, but we have a very simple form on the left side, only asking for the information we need. On the right side, we show something tangible, and they might land on this page initially, so they didn't see the front page. We want to make sure that they know there is something in here, and they'll be able to recognize a lot of these things and feel, okay, this feels like something. This feels like a place I belong. Like this is exactly what I need. Going through this onboarding process, there are some small things in terms of like helpful means to make sure that this onboarding process is easy to get through. But what I really want to show you guys is what happens when we get to this. Now, I just created the account essentially. The account is created and I could essentially just sign in now. What we have now is 3 optional steps. It's very subtle, but you can add your property later down here. So you could essentially skip this onboarding process. But because we want to facilitate this aha moment as soon as possible, we don't force them, but we really want them to experience this flow of 3 steps, which might seem counterintuitive to add more steps into a process. We just want to get them into the product as soon as possible. But in this case, we really want to hold them in their hand and show them what PropBinder is made for. And also, and I'll show you at the end, why this will play a huge difference when they enter the platform for the very first time. Now, we want to add a property. It's a property management tool, by the way. And we want to get their property in here. They can write the name of the property, and you can see some of the stuff being visualized on the right side. That will come into play now, where we have an integration to a very classic registry to get addresses. And if I pick an address, we're able to pull some information. Now, PropBinder has some integrations, and we can pull these publicly available information, and we can already now establish some sort of relationship. Very, very cool. If we continue, we get to the next step, and that is inviting your team members. Now, one of the biggest ways to minimize churn, which is minimizing people leaving as soon as they get the chance and never coming back, inviting team members is such a small and simple step to get people more involved in an organization. So it's not only on me to make sure I get to use this and get it integrate into my organization. I have now team members who can help me too. So filling in these information is quite simple. Adding the type of person, again, make them as ready as possible to use the platform, Maya in this case, and invite and continue. Now we're essentially in the platform, and we could have been in the platform 2 minutes ago, but we're here now. And the reason why we wanted to do this is we have a generic welcome message everybody receives. But as soon as I'm in here, I have a property. This would normally be an empty state that says, do something, get going. But now I'm already in the process of filling out my ESG because we have this right here. And we also have a little tooltip, which we had in the matrix as being like this guided path and these tooltips, personalize the experience. All of these things plays into this experience. We want to guide the user to get to what solves their pain point right away. And now this throws you into this ESG report. And the last thing I want to say about this is we have some gamification up in the top right corner. And the most crucial thing, to me at least, is that we're already in the process of finishing this report because PropBinder has some integrations. That doesn't matter. For the user, we're already in the progress of filling out this tedious form, which is very long. There's a lot of things we need. That's a great experience. We're already invested in the product. We're already in the platform. Maya is joining us shortly in the platform too. It's a very, very good experience. And if you can find your way, I think my recommendation here is gamification is great. If you can find it and do it quite simply, wonderful. But make sure that as soon as they hit the platform, it already feels familiar for them. They already feel at home. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this onboarding flow. And having that aha moment, that happened throughout the experience. I didn't mention it, but if it didn't happen here, it did happen maybe a bit earlier on when we were able to pull the data quite easily. So just to return to this graph, it doesn't necessarily require a whole lot of changes to be able to look at an area, build out your customer journey, first of all, figure out the steps you have in your process, and figure out where we lose people, where are the bottlenecks or where are the issues occurring, and how do we then tweak this to just improve this area a bit, because it's going to have a huge effect down here, which is money, like literally money that you are missing out on, both through the marketing efforts, but also through the simply people leaving. All right, limited development resources. Now we're getting into the more complex stuff, because we're kind of us as designers are kind of moving away from the traditional design work, and we're trying to become a bit more integrated into the organization, and we're trying to be a bit more helpful in our role. And this is where I think we serve the biggest role, honestly. On this matrix, we have some easy things. We have some very simple things in the left side, which yield some sort of high impact. And in this case, we have some Figma set up, and we use Figma as like the tool, and we use that here at the organization, and most people do. But it goes for any tool, any design tool, whatever you're using, it doesn't matter. Figma is just a synonym for a design tool in this case. We have some Figma specific features, which I think most platforms also either have, or there is a way to use it anyway. But some built-in features to document our work and make life easier for developers. We'll show some of this in a minute. In the top right corner, we have two of the most important things. And we're going to show a case study from our good friends, the Ally, of how we've kind of handled that with a component library, which is a library of UI elements, input fields, buttons, calendars, tables, whatever it might be, things to use in your platform continuously, reusable components that is both coded and designed one-to-one. Design tokens being smaller, granular things like a color, for example, your primary blue color as a brand color, that is one token. And we want to define all of these tokens, and I'll show you in a minute too. We have Storybook 2, which is not necessarily where you want to start looking when you're in a startup phase. But as soon as you start scaling and building out your development team, this might become very interesting to you. Storybook is a tool like Figma where you kind of organize your code, and you can preview it and quality assurance it. And there's a good link between design and developers. I won't talk about that today, but feel free to look it up on your own time. I want to base this section on a recent quote we got from one of our clients' developers. Ivan works at Ally as a front-end developer. He's a very good front-end developer. And that's also why this quote means even more to me, at least personally, which is through our design efforts, through something that is not code, through something that is not like the end product, because usually code is that thing, we're able to speed up his workflows. We're able to make him more efficient and productive every day. It might just be 2%, it might be 10%, it might some sort of number, but that over a year, that's going to equate to a lot of, well, what could have been 2 events being hired, they only need 1 because he's able to work for 1.5 person. You get what I mean? The point is that through design, we're able to facilitate that even can work quicker. And if you have a team of 10 developers, imagine the sort of impact design can have just by setting up some simple foundation. This is very fascinating to me, and it's about a lot of things other than just the practical side of building a product. Is also about being happy when you go to work as a developer. You're excited to build the next thing because it's designed very thoughtfully, and there's a whole lot of things in it which we can talk about another day too. I want to show you some deliverables, some of the things we've been working on with Ally. Going back quite a bit, we've worked with Ally for quite a few months now, maybe even more than a year, if my memory is not mistaken. If my memory is not something. This is the style guide, and this is very primitive. When you hear the word style guide, it's very primitive. But when you use it in a very effective way, this is what we would refer to as design tokens. If you use it in a very technical way, together with developers, you will get small, incremental, positive changes in how a developer works, what to expect. So we define the colors, obviously, that we use. These are what we would call primitive colors. So we just have a palette of colors, and we use some of them more than others. Some of them we might not have used yet. We just have this palette, and it is represented in the code as well. So Even knows exactly that when we use this sort of green, it will be an 800 green, and it means success. And it's very simple to have this, well, it's very nice to have this link between design and development, because we're able to speak the same language. And we're also able to not pick a new hex color every time we need a green, which I think most people are over nowadays, but that was a big issue once early in my career. Anyway, there's also something called semantic colors, which becomes very, very granular. So let's say that we use this gray color, we use that for all the borders, all the dividers, like you see over here in the text section. We use that always. Every designer, every developer should use 200 gray. We're able to make something called a semantic color called border gray, for example, or just plain border. And this is the thing we use all the time. Then it becomes even more valuable. Won't talk too much about that today either because I'm on a tight schedule. But my point is that we want to create this library of these tokens and these small values. We have spacing values, as you can see here, incrementally becoming larger and larger. And this is both nice for developers because they know exactly what kind of values they're working with. But it's also nice for designers because it will limit what they can do in a positive way, because these things are just things that needs to be, it helps with cohesiveness, the consistency in the platform. It makes it look great. It's also just easier to work with. We can go down into more specific things like content width. We can talk about effects. There is a bunch of different things that goes into these design tokens. And the beautiful thing about this too is that if we decide to change this drop shadow at any point, we're able to do it one place and it will change everywhere in the design. And if you're doing things very well, it should also have some sort of effect in code. But that is next level stuff. Okay, this is very primitive to some of you, and it is quite primitive, but it's very simple to both get wrong and simply not do. But the effect of it is quite evident. The next example I want to show you is how we work with components. Now, this is a Figma specific feature called Playground. And this is a pre-recorded video of me clicking around in Ally's design system or component library, where we have a very simple component just for the presentation's sake, input field, which can do a lot of things. It can be with or without a label. It can be with or without an icon. It can have a state of error. It can have a state of hover, disable. It can have a lot of things. And we want to make that as clear as possible to the developers, so Ivan knows exactly what to implement. Ivan knows exactly what this input field can do from the start, so he's able to implement it in the best possible way. If we have a simple input field and 3 months down the line we start wanting some sort of state or a new icon, it could have an effect on the code base and might create some technical debt, which we'll get into in a minute. Anyway, this is a very visual thing for developers, but it's certainly also a very good thing for designers. They're able to kind of stick to what we've established initially. It's a solid foundation, and we're able to make some very consistent experiences. So my recommendation here is, as soon as possible, start building up this component library for yourself in Figma or any other tool that you might be using. It's going to prove itself. The time spent on it is going to be well rewarded. Okay, next thing I want to show you is, again, to make developers move faster, be more productive, and then again, in this case, even, we're still looking at Ally design. This is one of the things that one of my colleagues, Modestus, made not long ago, which is a very complex little widget here, the training period. It's a well, I'll get into it, but it's basically a very overpowered date range, which is very nice, and there's a great purpose for having it. Annotation and documentation is very crucial, and this is where we see a lot of issues occurring with things being developed not ideally, because the developers doesn't know the full scope of things. They don't know how the designer is thinking or how the designer wanted this to be implemented to ensure the best user experience. So they base it on maybe just this sketch. Many developers would just receive this sketch. Maybe there's a little annotation here by Modestus in terms of how it works, but they're left alone to figure out all the small interactions, how this works, how this might should work, because we want to use it somewhere else in the platform later on. All of these things is up to the designer to kind of define in Figma, because that takes a fraction of the time for a developer to sit in code and play around with this. So what we usually do, and what Modestus have done in this example, is break this down into a few use cases where we clearly explore how these interactions work when we click here and click there, and how the end result looks. We have a few different variations of it with the drag canvas, for example, and you can see here, if I hover, we have these sort of interactions that is also very clear to someone like Ivan to be able to see, okay, we need to change the color on hover. That's very important for the user experience. and we need to change the cursor too. Like, these very small things might seem silly to focus on when you're in the midst of building your startup, but it takes so little time, and the effect of it in the long run is just going to be a very good and solid experience down the line. Again, there are multiple examples here, and we're looking into some calendar views and all these different interactions that, just by looking at design initially, not very apparent. We have error states too to handle some edge cases, very important for the user experience, more difficult and time consuming to do a week after if they didn't consider this initially. So this is just a shout out, a good recommendation to, if you have a designer or if you're doing it yourself, please feel free to consider all of these different edge cases and document it for your developers. They will love you for it, and they will be way more productive in the long run instead of them having to chop away in the code. Which leads me to, well, okay, I forgot we had a shameless little plug in here. We're doing, if this goes well, we'll be doing another webinar with Modestus, one of my colleagues, product designer. You'll be talking more about design systems and more about some of the work I imagine he's done for Ally, for example, and other clients. Design systems is very important. How to establish it, get going with it, how to use it fully in your organization. You can sign up to a newsletter or reach out to me and do whatever you feel like in order to get this information. But if you sign up to a newsletter, you'll be the first to know when this happens. All right. Back to the schedule here. Technical debt is what it leads me to, which is the fourth problem, and the problem I'm very passionate about. We have very short time. The technical debt is, there's a little explanation of it here, but it is basically just we do a lot of short-term fixes or have a lot of short-term solutions, and we do a lot of it in code. We want to bring that out of the code. We want to have some sort of designer, or we want to have most of the work being done in Figma before it gets into code, because code is so difficult to rewrite. It's going to create a lot of issues. Technical debt is one of the things that we see most of our startups struggle with when we meet them the first time, because they've been working, chipping away at building a product, and it's often a lot of wasted resources because we have to redo a lot of the things in terms of the front-end experience, for example. Anyway, on the matrix here, we have user research, which might surprise some of you that we put that quite high, but that is one of the best ways for you to kind of eliminate this technical debt, or at least minimize it greatly. Starting with design seems obvious. I've placed these over here to the left simply because it's so easy to get going. If you have any sort of power in your organization or in your startup, being able to say that we need to do this for XYZ is quite simple, and if you're working with nice people, they should be able to see the benefit of this. A UI kit is something we've been utilizing a lot lately with some of our startup clients, and it's very exciting. I'll get into that and the hot potato process. I'll focus on these three for now, but there's a lot to be said about this issue. When we talk user research, there is a lot of obvious value from our side of the view, from our side of the table, in terms of what it can add to your product experience and your business in general. One of the things I really want to talk about today is minimizing feature bloat and scope creep, which is these concepts of we build way more than we need. Like, we build a feature and it's way too advanced than it needed to be from a user perspective. And scope creep is very similar in a way that, oh, we might just add this, or what if we could filter, or what if we could change the view into a Kanban board, or oh my God, that would be very great. I've seen that in other products. We see that all the time without involving any users, and when it comes down to it, they didn't need any of that, at least not now. So there's a lot of great benefits of user research, and I want to give you a very clear example from a solution we've been working on, a dashboard solution. And dashboards in general is usually a place where you can just take a step back and reevaluate if you actually need it. But this is an example of a dashboard specification where we know we want to be able to give the users some custom charts. They should be able to build their own charts. They should be able to export their own reports, very customizable. Notifications, we want to send some very sensitive, time-sensitive notification if something happens. We want to be able to filter the views. We want to be able to add custom widgets to this dashboard. A lot of different nice features for this feature. If we do some research, if we talk to some end customers and just simply have some very low key informal interview sessions, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, online, physical, it doesn't matter, in person, we'll get some insights without asking them, do you want this? Do you want this? Because they'll say, yes, they would love to be able to do all these things. But when it comes down to it, what do you really need to make your life easier, to make your business operate better? And that's kind of what we do and really want to recommend doing more of, just you as a founder or whoever you are doing this work. Because we see often in these cases that what was the initial spec on the left side here becomes a completely different solution when we start talking to the people who we're building it for. And that could mean that the multi-level filters just become date range filters, because we don't need to be able to filter by assignee or category or status. We actually just need to be able to see some sort of time spectrum. What was a big custom reports builder now becomes, let's just export this to a CSV file, because we actually just want to open it in Excel. That's a way better experience. I feel way more confident. Pre-made charts is fine, because we've spoken with 3 different end users, and they all kind of say the same thing, that they need these types of charts. Well, let's just make these initially and we can see where it takes us. It's way simpler to just make a new chart when we need it than it is to build a whole spaceship that is able to customize these charts from a user perspective. Notifications, same spec. We figured out that was actually quite needed. And again, same with the pre-made widgets. We can simplify this a lot. This will result in this case, 40% less code. Our developers doesn't need to code as much, which is nice in terms of time. It takes less time to build, but also just maintaining it. And that's where technical debt really quickly builds up, because if we're just building whatever we feel like the users needs, and these are often spaceships solutions, we end up with a lot of code that need to be maintained, and we need to build on top of that at some point, or we need to rework something later on, and it's all just going to be a big mess. That's what we often see. I want to talk a bit about the UI kits briefly. We have a lot of good examples of UI kits, and when I say UI kits, it's these publicly available, typically open source libraries of really well-coded, well-designed features, or building blocks, components like input fields, button, calendar views, tables, that is just ready to be taken by your developer and then implemented one-to-one. You might do some customizations in terms of the visuals. This is a calendar view on the left side and the code on the right. Copy paste it and we're going. You might have to do some customization visually. Sure, that's fine. And there's definitely, usually what we see is we need to design like 20% to make it very customizable for this particular case. If we're building a ESG reporting module, we might need some sort of matrix that obviously is not part of this very generic UI kit. But a UI kit will give you 80% of the experience, at least initially from a startup perspective, and the last 20% you need to think of yourself and kind of make very custom to your customers. We have a lot of good examples of this, but I don't think I have time to delve into too much of that. The last thing I want to talk about before I show you the whole matrix is some process internally. Now, when we look at designer-developer relationship, if you are so lucky to have both internally or maybe have a freelance designer and an in-house developer, you want to make sure that they work nicely together. Now, most people work in this waterfall format, which is just designer does their thing and the developer does her thing. That process in itself is very hurtful, and we would strongly recommend you to do what is referred to as a hot potato process, which I was told by my colleague Stephanie might have some negative connotations, but it is quite positive actually, because we want to keep the ball moving. In this case, a potato, we want to keep the potato moving around in the organization between the designer and developer to make sure that the developer is able to check the designer in terms of, oh, now we're designing something new we've never seen before. Can't we just reuse this over here from our UI kit or component library? And likewise, the designer is able to check the developer in a very calm way, asking maybe we should put that extra hour or two into making this just a bit more polished. But they're able to do this ping pong, which in the end should leave you with strong organization, a happy workplace, but also a much, much better product. It's quite simple. It's just a cultural thing, and you kind of need to be the stakeholder in making sure that happens in your organization. The final thing, the matrix here at the end is colored by each section, which I don't imagine you recall what is, but basically this paints a clear picture in terms of what we've just been through in terms of our experience with how you should prioritize as a startup how you should prioritize some of these design related things. And there are some clear benefits over here in getting the practical stuff right. There are some website and brand related stuff, and there are a lot of in terms of onboarding and making sure that you start using user research in your organization. That's what I have. We have 10 minutes left for Q&A if there's anything. If there's nothing, I can assume that I've just been very clear in my communication. So hopefully that's the case. All good?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. I hope it made a lot of sense. I can go back to the matrix here. No questions?
No questions. Christian had a comment that is a great overview and holistic for a startup. And at some point you discussed some sort of pain points, and he agrees that it's a classic and they always add too many things and make the first version too complex. So
great
I
point.
guess it makes a bit sense here.
It does.
And that they have learned the hard way. What you have described, the pain points.
That's very classic. All right. If there's no other questions, there is.
We have a question here. So how can you push this earlier into the product development and funnel strategy?
Push what specifically? Is there any specifics?
Christian, what specifically is it that we want to push here into the product development?
Oh, right. Yes.
This mindset.
The mindset of design-developer relationship. I think I can just speak to, however, I realize you can correct me if I misunderstood the question, but being able to, like, pushing that design mindset is depending on your role and depending on the size of the organization, of course, there are different ways, but I think what we typically preach here at EDL is typically just try to do it on your own accord. So you might not need the permission to start doing some very minor things in some of these areas that we're highlighting here on the screen. And if it is, for example, to start establishing a component library or start setting up Figma, like a free version of Figma, all of these things is quite attainable for you as an individual, depending on where you are and what you're doing. But just simply starting slowly without permissions necessarily, without hurting anybody too, but just showing the stakeholders around you, show them in your organization the value of whatever you are establishing. A component library is a great example, a storybook, or setting up Figma in the right way, or having suggestions for how to improve the branding or the experience on the website. All these small things is just executing on it in small increments and then showing it off to the right people, I think is how I would approach it. Anyway.
Okay, so we also have a question from Anders. If your product doesn't create immediate value, but sees a value creation over time, how can you think that into the onboarding process?
I think that's a very good question, because it very much depends, I think, on the context of the product too. But I think he's referring to, and you can weigh in on this too, but like the aha moment or that comes very late in the process. I think being able to, there might be enough value there to begin with. Like the aha moment might actually occur earlier than you might expect it to. So obviously, if they're staying put, if it's an enterprise piece of software, there is a bigger, it's more okay for you to not have that aha moment as quick as possible, because there is some sort of investment upfront typically, or some sort of there's some sort of stakeholder that said we need to use this piece of software, so the aha moment is less important as soon as possible. But I think trying to push that aha moment up front in maybe an incremental way is very hard without a specific context. But being able to, you're nodding, being able to maybe take that aha moment that comes here and be vocal about it early in the process, gamify whatever you are trying to achieve at that aha moment. Make sure that that process is clear, that at some point you'll get to an aha moment. But again, it depends very much on what kind of aha moment we're talking about and what kind of value we're talking about. It's a very difficult, very good question. So I think I would have to get a bit more context around it.
Okay, so you're done with that question, or?
I think so.
Yeah. I think it was a mistake.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a question also from Neboisa. If you would recommend having a developer look into learning Figma, or could be any other tool, getting closer to the designer and the other way around. I feel as if we're having both parts closer delivers the best product. What is your experience?
For sure. I think they might not have the time necessary to learn Figma in the same way as you do, but I think especially with dev mode, if you're privileged enough to have access to that in your organization, and your developers have, because there's a price tag associated with it, I think having them learning dev mode is quite crucial. And I think for most designers, and we realize that too, that we take it for granted that we're very good at Figma, and it's very intuitive to us, but sitting like down next to your developers and seeing how they use Figma, and make sure that you show them all these special features like the playground I showed earlier, which is quite a hidden feature. Just making sure that their workflow kind of lives up to what Figma can provide, because there's a lot of hidden values in there. But I fully agree, sitting down next to your developer, making sure they use Figma the right way, and ensuring that you set up Figma for them to thrive too, through annotations, through prototypes if necessary, or through how you structure your Figma files. I fully agree. There's a lot of hidden or lost potential there. Also with clients, for that matter.
We can also see that Christian agrees with you on this question.
I like Christian.
This answer.
He sounds very smart.
And we also have a new question from Mignon. Thanks you so much for sharing this, Frederick. And wonders, have you seen the role of designers evolve in a startup's context from your experience or client-based? And what would you say is critical expertise to prioritize?
I think, yes. I think most startups are kind of getting a sense for, because the market is often very saturated, and because we see a lot of the same things, one of the ways to differentiate yourself is through design. So design is slowly but surely getting a more progressive role in the whole startup development. I think in terms of what, I think being a good communicator is very important as a designer, especially in a startup, because you want to be available, and you want to be there to kind of take the charge in this, because if you're not doing it, it might not happen. If you're in the startup already, that's a great sign that there are some stakeholders or CEO or some sort of leadership that understands the value of design, or at least have been told about the value of design, so they've hired you or someone similar. But I think one of the biggest things you can do is communicate the value of design, like from a business perspective, so they understand. There's nothing worse than explaining design in a way that becomes very superficial. And I think that's making it seem like a very mature and grown-up thing that has an actual value in the organization is one of the best things you can do, I think. So communication, of course, your craft needs to be good too, but you can come a long way with just communication and being a bit strategic in how you approach design as as a topic, as a discipline, because you need that buy-in from them to do the user research or get this tool that you need. I think that's very crucial. But in general, we see startups being the job market in general is very difficult. But I think as a startup, we see, at least us, we exist for that very reason, that startups see a value in hiring us. And that must be a sign that most people, when they understand the value of design that we need to teach them, they want to invest in it. I think so. I'm very positive in that mindset. And also we see more design founders breaking out and building companies, which is very exciting, which also sets a kind of a precedence for a very high level of craft in the software, which makes the people without designers, I don't know, shaking their boots because the competition becomes fierce.
Great.
Good question.
Okay. So I can't see any more questions right now. If anybody else has anything else, then just add it. But otherwise, clock is 10 and everybody's thanking for a great start of the day.
Great start of the day. Very exciting. Thank you for tuning in too. Very nice. Got to get back to work now.
Yeah.
Great. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Are we done? Do we have the question? I can just follow up after.